It was a glorious, sun-drenched morning in the rolling hills surrounding the grand homestead, where the air smelled faintly of pine and the promise of a hearty breakfast. The sprawling grounds of the great estate were quiet, save for the early morning chatter of the birds nestled in the ancient oaks. Down by the porch, Jed stood with his hands tucked into his pockets, breathing in the crisp air as he looked out across the lawn.
Good morning, Jeb.
Breakfast ready yet? Jeb, who was busy tending to the small iron stove near the edge of the porch, looked up with a slow, apologetic shake of his head. Ready not, boy. Granny ain't up yet. Before another word could be traded between them, the heavy wooden front door burst open with a loud, echoing thud. Ellie Mae came rushing out onto the porch, her face pale and her breath coming in short, panicked gasps.
Pa.
Jethro. Granny's gone. Her bed ain't been slept in. Jed turned around quickly, his brow furrowing with sudden concern.
What?
She's plumb disappeared, Ellie Mae cried, gesturing wildly back toward the dark hallway of the house. Ain't no sign of her. Jethro, who had just wandered out behind his cousin while rubbing the sleep from his eyes, adjusted his suspenders and offered a thoughtful expression. You reckon she went back to the hills with Alberta Bradshaw? No, sir, Ellie Mae countered immediately, shaking her head so hard her golden curls bounced. I seen her after Miss Bradshaw left. I'll bet she's been kidnapped. Oh, Pa. Oh, please don't let no harm come to my darling little granny. Jethro watched her tears with a look of profound solemnity, nodding slowly. That's real touchin', boy. Well, I sure don't want to have to eat Ellie's cookin'. Jed ignored his nephew's culinary anxieties and looked out toward the far edge of the property, where the sun was just starting to light up the roofline of a small, weather-beaten structure. I think I know where she might be. Where, Pa? Ellie Mae asked, wiping her cheek. Well, ever since we put up the old cabin out back, Granny has had a certain look in her eyes, Jed explained, his voice calm and steady. I'll bet you that's where we find her.
Come on.
The small group marched across the dew-kissed grass, heading toward the modest wooden cabin that stood as a stark contrast to the grand mansion nearby. As they walked past the small animal pens, Ellie Mae couldn't help but offer her usual bright greetings to the livestock. Morning, Mrs. Hog.
Mrs. Cow.
Good morning, chickens. They reached the sturdy timber door of the cabin, and Jed pushed it open gently. Sure enough, sitting right there by a crackling little fire, looking as cozy as a cricket in a rug, was Granny. Well, we kind of figured we'd find you out here, Jed said with a warm smile. Granny, did you spend the night in that little old cabin? Granny rocked back in her wooden chair, a look of supreme satisfaction on her weathered face. I did, and it was pure heaven. Jethro looked around the cramped, dusty room, scratching his head in genuine bewilderment. Heaven? This little shack? Jeth, let's all move back in here where we belong and live the good life, Granny declared, tapping her foot with absolute certainty. Jed chuckled softly, shaking his head. Granny, we ain't movin' out of no 32-room mansion into this dump. Just then, a rich, savory aroma began to drift from the iron skillet resting over the hearth, filling the small cabin with a scent so heavenly it made everyone's stomach growl in unison. Jethro leaned forward, his nose twitching like a rabbit's. Something sure smells good. I'm fixin' fried ham, whole cakes, and gravy, Granny announced proudly, lifting the lid to reveal the sizzling contents. Jethro's eyes went wide as saucers, and he turned to his uncle with utter devotion. Uncle Jed, let's move in here and live the good life. Wait, super stomach, Jed joked, placing a massive, grounding hand on his nephew's shoulder. Let me set the table first. Ellie Mae looked around the tiny single room, trying to figure out the logistics of their potential new arrangement. Pa, is we really gonna move into this little cabin, all four of us? Well, if we don't, Granny ain't gonna give us no peace and no victuals, Jed admitted, knowing full well the strength of the elderly woman's resolve. Granny sniffed the air, looking over at her granddaughter with a sharp glance. Well, if you want to stay in the mansion, I'll cook for you. Well, that's surpassing kind of you, Ellie, Jed said, turning to his daughter with a chuckle. Well, I need to practice, Ellie Mae said honestly, though everyone in the room knew her cooking was notorious for a reason. True, true, Jed agreed gently before turning back to the bigger picture. But if we don't do like Granny wants, we ain't never gonna hear the last of it. Jethro, still thinking about the sleeping arrangements, looked at the small floor space. Well, where'll we sleep? Well, you women folks can take the bedroom, Jed decided, gesturing toward the small curtained-off corner. Yes, there are meals spreader blankets in front of the fireplace. Jethro poked the floorboards with his boot. That floor's awful hard. Well, it'll only be till Granny gets this notion out of her craw, Jed whispered back. Suddenly, a cheerful shadow fell across the threshold. The short, energetic figure of Shorty stepped into the cabin, tipped his hat, and smiled at the gathered family. Oh, here you are. Morning, Shorty. Morning, Miss Kelly. What you doin' down here? We's fixin' to move into this little old cabin, Jed explained, gesturing to the rustic surroundings. Shorty looked around, stunned. Everybody? You're welcome to join us, Shorty, Ellie Mae offered brightly. You can bed down on the floor with Jethro and me. Shorty looked at the hard floor, then thought of the massive, empty luxury waiting just a few hundred yards away. If it's all the same to you, I'd like to stay in the mansion. Jed raised an eyebrow. Well, you'll be all alone. I'll rough it, Shorty insisted with a mischievous glint in his eye. Can you manage that big old place all by yourself? Jed asked, wanting to be entirely sure his friend wouldn't be overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the estate. Jerry used to run a hotel by himself, Shorty pointed out dismissively. Jed reminded him of the recent departure of their household help. Elvin and Bradshaw ain't here to cook for you no more. I'll make out, Shorty said confidently. Jed shook his head with a slight smile. That big old mansion is likely to be kind of cold and lonely without a woman's touch. Yeah, that's true, Shorty conceded, though his mind was already spinning with grand possibilities. But I'll get along. Okay, Shorty, Jed said, extending his hand to seal the arrangement. Place is yours. It's a deal, Shorty shouted, shaking Jed's hand vigorously. As the family settled into their cozy, cramped breakfast, Shorty strutted back toward the massive, empty mansion, humming a joyous little tune to himself about the grand madams and gentlemen from Beverly Hills and Hollywood who moved to the hills for fun and thrills. He imagined the rooms so large, the food so good, and the wonderful hospitality he could provide if the right crowd ever happened to wander by. Meanwhile, across town in the bustling center of the city, the grand offices of the Commerce Bank were buzzing with activity. Inside the executive suite, a sharp-dressed secretary stepped up to the massive mahogany desk where the chief executive sat reviewing the morning ledger. Excuse me, Chief. Several girls from the secretarial pool would like to take a little extra time at lunch to go and look at a new hotel for women. The chief didn't even look up from his papers. The answer is no. All they need is 15 minutes, the secretary pleaded gently. They can take my car if you let them go. The answer is no, the chief repeated, his voice firm and unyielding. Some millionaire has donated his mansion as a hotel for young working girls, and the rates are fabulously cheap. She tried again, hoping the mention of a charitable millionaire might pique his interest. The answer is no. It's located close to your house, and if you needed to have some dictation done some night, they'd be available, she added, playing her best card. The chief paused, his pen hovering just above the paper. The answer is no. They'll work for nothing, she whispered. The chief snapped his ledger shut, a wide, greedy smile spreading across his face. The answer is yes. The secretary smiled, knowing exactly how to handle her boss. You knew I'd give in. I ain't got an old sock, the chief muttered, leaning back in his leather chair. Yes, you're a regular marshmallow, she teased lightly. The chief leaned forward, his business instincts taking over. The rates are cheap, you say? Yes, the girls think they'll be able to save at least $10 a week over what they're paying now, she explained. $10 a week, say, that's a lot for a working girl, the chief mused, tapping his fingers together as an idea began to form. Oh, it certainly is. The trouble is they'll squander it foolishly. I'll tell you what. I'll withhold $5 a week from each girl and put it in a special Christmas fund. The secretary blinked, realizing exactly what kind of fund he was talking about. Well, that's marvelous. You bet, the chief grinned, rubbing his hands together. I'll need all I can get next Christmas. An hour later, a group of excited young women from the bank arrived at the gates of the grand estate, gaping at the manicured lawns, the massive columns, and the sparkling blue waters of the swimming pool. Well, this really is a mansion, one of the girls gasped, holding her notepad tightly. Look at the beautiful ground. And the rates are so cheap. I wonder what the catch is. Right on cue, Shorty leaned out of the grand front entrance, wearing a flamboyant silk smoking jacket that was several sizes too large for him. Hello, girls. The girls stopped in their tracks. There's the catch, one whispered to the other. Oh, Shorty's cute, another whispered back, giggling. Yeah, and he's fun. Welcome to Shorty's Hotel for Women, where you live in luxury for $1 a day, Shorty announced grandly, stepping down the marble stairs with his arms wide open. And that includes private room and bath, delicious meals, maid service, laundry, swimming pool, tennis courts, cocaine, and vineyard. The girls gasped in disbelief. For $1 a day? How can you do it? Volume, Shorty replied instantly with a wink. Come on inside and look around. He led the flock of secretaries through the massive double doors into a world of polished marble and crystal chandeliers. Girls, look at this, one of them cheered. What a pad. This is super. You ain't seen nothing yet, Shorty bragged, guiding them toward the center of the estate. Step into the main ballroom. It's free entertainment in here every night. Really? What kind of entertainment? Music and dancing, Shorty said, doing a little jig on the polished hardwood. Do you have a dancing act? For girls and a fella, Shorty replied smoothly.
Who are they?
You four and me, Shorty chuckled, earning a round of playful groans from the group. One of the more practical secretaries looked around the massive, empty house with a slight air of caution. Do you think we're going to be safe in this hotel of yours? Oh, of course, Shorty assured her, puffing out his chest. If anybody gets out of line, just call for the house detective. Where is he? Right here, Shorty said, pointing proudly to himself. The leader of the secretarial group suddenly checked her wristwatch, her eyes widening in panic. Girls, our lunch hour is almost gone. We have to get back to the bank. Mr. Drysdale will be furious. Shorty waved his hand dismissively. You can't leave yet. You ain't seen the place. I'll phone Miss Hathaway. She's a good scout. She'll cover for us.
There's a phone in the lobby.
No charge for local calls. Back at the Commerce Bank, the telephone on the main desk rang loudly. Miss Hathaway snatched it up instantly. Mr. Drysdale's office. Oh, yes, Helen. Helen who? From the adjacent office, Mr. Drysdale heard the conversation and stormed out, his face turning a bright shade of crimson. One of the girls who's looking at the new hotel for women. Tell them if they're not back in 5 minutes, they're fired. Chief Hathaway, get me that phone. Where are you? On the other end of the line, Helen held the receiver away from her ear for a second before calling out across the marble lobby. Just a moment, Mr. Drysdale, sir. Shorty, what's the address here? Shorty, who was busy trying to balance a tray of refreshments, called back loudly. I don't know. It's the Jed Clampett Mansion. Helen spoke clearly into the mouthpiece. It's the Jed Clampett Mansion. The Jed Clampett Mansion. Mr. Clampett is the millionaire who donated his mansion for the hotel. He probably realizes how oppressed and underpaid your secretaries are. Mr. Drysdale's entire demeanor changed in a fraction of a second. His anger vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated opportunism. You think so? Why else would you do it? Helen, dear. Now you girls take your time. In fact, why don't you take the rest of the day off? Miss Hathaway will do your work. Helen smiled broadly, signaling to the other girls. Oh, thanks. And, Helen, Mr. Drysdale added quickly, trying to secure his standing with the wealthy homeowner, tell your landlord that I send him my very best.
Goodbye. Goodbye, sir.
And thank you, Helen said, hanging up the phone with a triumphant cheer. Girls, we have the rest of the day off. And, Shorty, Mr. Drysdale would like to send you his best. Shorty scratched his chin, looking slightly confused by the banker's sudden generosity. I thought I had his best. But if he's got any better news, tell him to send them over. Down by the old rustic cabin, the afternoon sun was beating down on the small farmyard. Jethro was trudging back and forth with a heavy wooden bucket, looking utterly miserable as he dumped food into the animal pen. Jed strolled by, leaning against the fence post with a gentle smile. Hey, Uncle Jed, look what Granny's got me doing. Good for her, Jed said, nodding approvingly. But I'm a sophisticated international playboy with a 6th grade education, a member of the jet set, Jethro complained, dropping his bucket with a loud clatter. Jet setters don't slop hogs. Jed raised an eyebrow, amused by his nephew's grand illusions. They don't, huh?
No, sir.
No, Jethro insisted, crossing his arms. We jets around betwixt Paris, Rome, and tequila, and drinks Acapulcos. Jed chuckled, shaking his head at the boy's wild imagination. You ain't never done none of them things. I sat on a jet, Jethro argued defiantly, puffing out his chest. That makes me a jet setter. Well, right now, you're a hog slopper, Jed corrected him firmly but gently. And after that, you're gonna be a cow milker. Jethro let out a long, dramatic sigh, looking back toward the grand roof of the mansion visible over the trees. Please, Uncle Jed, let me move back into the mansion where I belong. Who do your chores? Jed asked reasonably. Well, Ellie Mae just loves to do this here rube stuff, Jethro suggested, trying to pass the buck to his cousin. Jed looked thoughtful for a moment, wondering how his old friend was faring up in the big house. Well, maybe Shorty is getting a mite lonesome up there all by himself. Oh, I'll bet you he's just dying to have me join him, Jethro cheered, his mood instantly flipping back to total excitement. Up at the mansion, the grand ballroom had been transformed into a temporary dance floor. A lively melody was playing from the record player, and Shorty was in his absolute element, spinning around with 2 secretaries at once. Like that, he cheered, showing off his best dance moves. Stop by the bank and bring along the best of the rest. Remember, single girls only. And if they dance this close, they get the cut rate. Suddenly, a loud, familiar voice echoed through the grand hallways, interrupting the music. Hey, Shorty, where are you? Shorty stopped dancing, his jaw dropping as he recognized the booming voice.
Who's that?
It's one of the hard hits. He's supposed to be in the house. I'll get rid of him. See you later. Shorty hurried out to the grand foyer just as Jethro marched through the front doors, carrying a small burlap sack of his belongings. Oh, here you are, Shorty, Jethro boomed happily. Good news. I'm moving in with you. Shorty's face fell. That's good news? That's good news. Jethro repeated with absolute certainty, looking out the window at a sleek vehicle parked in the driveway. Hey, whose car is that? Oh, Miss Jane's, Shorty replied quickly, trying to sound casual. What's she doing here? Oh, she come by to offer me a job down at the bank working in the secretarial pool. Shorty lied smoothly, trying to protect his newfound paradise from his giant cousin. You staking it, ain't you? No, I don't think so, Jethro said, shaking his head. Shorty nodded eagerly. Shorty, that secretarial pool is full of pretty girls. Yeah, that's a trouble, Jethro. I'm getting too old for that kind of nonsense. Jethro grinned from ear to ear, flexing his muscles. I ain't. I'm just the right age for that kind of nonsense. Yeah, oh, I wish I was young again like you, Shorty sighed, pretending to be filled with deep regret. Oh, come on, Shorty, Jethro begged, leaning down so he was eye to eye with the smaller man. Let me have the job. Huh, Shorty? Huh, please? Huh, Shorty, please? Shorty feigned reluctance, tapping his chin as if considering a massive sacrifice. I don't know, Jethro. You'd likely get them girls stirred up to where they couldn't work. It's a doggone good looking. I'll force myself to look homely, Jethro promised earnestly, pulling a ridiculous, twisted face to prove his point. Look at that. Well, maybe, Shorty hesitated. Oh, come on, Shorty, please, huh? Jethro whined. Well, okay, Shorty finally agreed, throwing his hands up in the air. Oh, Thank you, Shorty. Thank you, Jethro cheered, nearly lifting Shorty off the ground with a massive hug. When you get to the bank, just go right on into the secretarial pool, Shorty instructed, dusting off his jacket. I'll arrange everything. I really appreciate this, Shorty, Jethro said, filled with immense gratitude. And to prove it, I'm going to give you half everything I make. Shorty held up a finger, correcting the math instantly. Half or nothing. Big deal, Jethro muttered, though he was far too excited about the pretty girls to care about the financial details. Back at the Commerce Bank, Mr. Drysdale was pacing around his office, calculating the growing profits of his new charitable venture. Miss Hathaway walked in, holding a fresh stack of personnel files. Chief, I questioned the rest of the girls in the secretarial pool, and 3 more of them qualify for Mr. Columbus Hotel. Mr. Drysdale stopped pacing, his eyes gleaming. What do you mean, qualify? Well, it's restricted to single girls, Miss Hathaway explained. Say, that's a great idea, Mr. Drysdale beamed, grabbing his calculator. Let's see. That's a total of 7. $5 each. That's $35 a week. That makes over $1,800 a year for the Milburn Drysdale Christmas Fund. Miss Hathaway looked at him with a steady, judgmental gaze. Chief, you're not going to really deduct that money? Mr. Drysdale looked offended by the question. How long have you known me? You're going to deduct. Deduct that money, Miss Hathaway sighed. You bet, Mr. Drysdale cheered. Only one girl isn't interested. Mr. Drysdale frowned. Why not? I'll let her explain, Miss Hathaway said, opening the door to the outer office. Come in, Miss Bell. A young woman stepped into the office, holding her purse tightly. Mr. Drysdale cleared his throat, adopting his most paternal tone. Mr. Drysdale wants to know why you're not interested in the hotel for women. Well, I live at home, so I wouldn't save anything, Miss Bell explained softly. Mr. Drysdale leaned across his desk. Do you live in a mansion? Of course not, she replied, confused. Do you ride to work in a limousine? No, I ride the bus. How much does it cost you? 50 cents a day. That's $2.50 a week, Mr. Drysdale calculated rapidly. Miss Hathaway crossed her arms, trying to figure out his angle. What are you getting at, Chief? Well, I live next door to the Clampett mansion, and she can ride back and forth with me, Mr. Drysdale offered grandly, painting himself as a saintly neighbor. Miss Bell's eyes lit up with excitement. Gee, that'd be